Well, it's a comfortably mild day here in late April. A little too mild for snowflakes to be dangling in the air, but what we have dangling in the air here are the flowers of a flowering dogwood tree. And I'm making every effort on this channel to show you where these trees would grow in a natural setting, where you might find them while you're out exploring or hiking, or gathering mushrooms, or whatever you like to do in the outdoors. So here's a flowering dogwood, an understory situation. It's probably about 30 feet high, and the flowers are about 25 feet high. So the only way I can see them is to be above them. I'm on a pretty steep hillside here. This is in the Shawnee State Forest in Scioto County, Ohio. This is called the Little Smokies because the land is steep and very hilly. It resembles small mountains. Miniature Smoky Mountains. 300 miles to our south is the Smoky Mountain National Park, but this has a lot of the same plants and a lot of hiking trails here. So this is our flowering dogwood. Often blooms in April, the second half of April. If you live further north, it can be in May. If you live further south, it can be a lot earlier. It's common throughout the eastern United States, but not north of about New York City, Boston area. Comes into the Hudson Valley and Connecticut valleys, but not into interior New England or the interior parts of Pennsylvania, the northern tier of Pennsylvania. So it's a very common tree in what we call an oak hickory forest. It does require some breaks in the canopy to get enough sun to come into bloom. You can find little saplings and smaller trees without flowers sometimes, but to get full foliage and lots of flowers, it does require a break in the canopy. And that's what we often find in these oak hickory forests. The oak trees are prone to wind throw, and it creates almost constant gaps in the canopy for trees like this to prosper. Similar habitat as a redbud. These tend to be more in the acid soils, and redbud tend to be more in the limey soils, but there is some overlap between these two tree species. I can't get a good look at these flowers from here, but I can add that on to this video in a few days when I get a tree that's a little closer to the ground. But this is our flowering dogwood with its spring appearance, and this is a complement to the segments I've already done on the fall foliage and berries of these flowering dogwoods, as well as the foliage. And let's continue studying our flowering dogwood with its spring appearance. This is at the Shawnee State Forest, just a couple miles from where I took that other video. In that case, I was looking down from above at the foliage that was, the flowers that were 25 feet off the ground. Well, in this case, they're not quite so high, and I can get a good look at them. There's a stump back there. It's probably not easy to see, but in the background there's a stump from a large, probably oak tree that was felled. They do some logging in this forest, and that created an opening for this tree to probably get more flowers and some branches to grow laterally instead of straight up. And that made it easier for me to get a good look at these flowers. So let's take a look at the size of these flowers and the color. This is a very common landscape tree. And here's our flowering dogwood up close. From one side to the other is probably 3 inches across. And a beautiful white color. Some of the garden varieties are pink, but the ones you find in nature are white. And they will get a beautiful red berry and a crimson red foliage, usually in October. So this is our flowering dogwood with its spring appearance. I've got the bark here in plain view. It gets plenty of little polygons, about the size of a dime at the most, on this larger tree. So it's easy to tell from the other trees. So there are some trees that get the similar pattern, but it's usually a larger pattern. The persimmons and the black gum can get this type of pattern. I haven't got to those on this channel yet. Those will be coming in the future. But for now, this is the tree that I've covered that has that pattern of polygons on the bark. Even when the trees are still very small, it gets this pattern. So it's pretty easy to tell in the wintertime just by the bark alone. And here's our flowering dogwood in late April in full bloom here at the Shawnee State Forest.